Welcome back. I'm Gary Parr, and you are listening to Fiber Talk, the twice-weekly podcast for the needle and thread people. Joining me this week, Kim Young. Hi, Kim.
Hey, Gary. How are you?
Going to be okay. Now, for those who don't know, number one, go back and listen to older podcasts, but Kim with us, 2 or 3 times here. Kim is the owner of Sassy Jack's, the shop down in Weaverville, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Okay. I just have to pause for
one of those southern states.
Yeah. It's north or south. So it's Weaverville, North Carolina. Terrific shop. And I'm going to be down there at the end of May for one of the 2-day Nicola Parkman sampler classes. So that's going to be fun. That's Bethia, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's going to be a good one. Yeah.
Yes. And sold out, a couple slots left.
We have a little bit of space left, believe it or not. But yeah, we're really sold out. It was interesting. We did 3 sessions, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, Tuesday. And Monday, Tuesday was the most demanded spot,
Really?
which I thought was interesting. Yeah.
Oh.
So we actually have a little bit of space on Saturday, Sunday, and maybe 1 or 2 on Thursday, Friday. But we're getting there. We're getting ready to close it down. So if people are interested, now's the time, because we'll need to close it down and start kitting up. But
let's go, folks. Yep. So I'll be down there for the Thursday, Friday show. Probably do a couple of Facebook Live maybe events and do some other things. So plus just being there and meeting the people and listening to Nicola talk about samplers. What's wrong with that?
Right. Yeah.
That's okay. And that Bethia thing, holy smokes, that's a good one.
Oh, it's beautiful. Let me tell you, we've got the model here, and she's getting framed right now. She's stinking gorgeous. She's really beautiful, and we're framing it so that you can see the back as well as the front, because it's a reversible band sampler. So, that's the important part. If you want to stitch it reversibly, and not everybody will, but this class is kind of focused on giving people some skills and really more confidence to do that if they want to do that. So we'll have it where you can see the front and the back, but it is really gorgeous. It's really pretty.
Yeah, it is. It's a special one. Well, yeah, last time I was there, Nicola and I did a video. I'll put a link to it. Did a video about that. It's a gorgeous sampler. Okay, now that you're in the process of doing it, you can answer one of the questions I've had. When you frame something, a reversible something like that, how is that done?
It's hard.
Or not your problem. That's the framer's
No, it's
problem.
my problem. It really is. If you ever take one to your framer, you'll learn very quickly. It's your problem, not theirs. They'll help you with it. But so there's 2 things. There's 2 things that usually get framed where you want to see the back. One of them is something like Bethia, where you've got a reversible stitching that you want to see the reverse side of. The other one is a darning stitch, a darning sampler, which I don't know that you've seen very many of those. I don't know, but they're very beautiful. And so you want to see the back on those. So the difference comes into play when the edges are finished or not finished. And so on Bethia, Nicola stitched her this model, and so there's extra fabric, and it's actually, the edges aren't hem stitched or anything like a traditional sampler would be in its finished state. This one's the edges aren't finished, and so we were able to put it between 2 pieces of mat board, and a lot of times you don't put a mat on an antique sampler or on a model, but in this case we had to hide the extra fabric. But doing that gave us something to support the sampler itself as well. So, adding that mat board in there, front and back, gave us a way to secure that extra fabric and to secure the sampler in place. And so it will just kind of lay in there between those mat boards, and then it'll have glass on the front. Because this one's so huge, we're probably going to put plexiglass on the back. Otherwise, the weight really is hard to manage. And so that's how this one's getting framed. And the framer doing it is local to me. She does all of our antiques. She's really good. And she's a big textile person. She used to run like a huge shop somewhere else and wanted to slow down a little bit and came down here. And she hasn't gotten to slow down.
Yeah.
But it
Going to
works
slow
out that
down
way.
and go
But
down there and work 12-hour days. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But so she's really good. Now I did take her a couple of darning samplers that I've purchased that are just really beautiful. And they have finished edges. And not only do they have finished edges, but they have some needlework on some of the corners, some really beautiful hand stitched lace on the edges. It's just beautiful. And a darning sampler, and this might be more than anybody wants to know, but it's kind of neat, and they might want to look it up, or I'll send you a picture of one. But they were done to show an embroiderist's skill set at repair. And so when people wore clothes that, I think I've heard you talk about this before, that might be passed down generations, or they were extremely affluent or even royal, their clothes were mended. They weren't just thrown away.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had to have people with really great skill sets on mending. And that's what darning really means. And so you've got these gorgeous samplers with little blocks all over them of different types of needlework. And they're beautiful. They're done with gorgeous silks, and so they would cut a hole in the linen and then they would mend it, and the mending would look like it might look on an incredibly beautiful gown of some sort, or some kind of, clothing that you'd see on somebody, really, really wealthy at that point in time. Or there might be reticelli, or there might be, some needle lace. There's all kinds of neat, beautiful things in there. And so that's what they were. They were basically a resume for somebody. And they would take these things and show them, and they're typically not framed ever because you need to see the back. And mine aren't framed right now, but to show them, in an environment like this, they need to be in some protection a little bit. And so we weren't able to figure those out when I took them over there. We spent about 3 hours looking at the two of them. And at the end of the day, I said, okay, I'm going to have to think about this, because I couldn't figure out how to get them, framed and still see the edges and not hurt them in any way. And so, I might revisit those at some point, because I'd love to get them out where people can see them. But so it's not easy. Mm-mm. And you do work in partnership with your framer to get through something challenging like that. But,
so the on Bathia, the mat then allows you to put some tension on the fabric to get it squared up and not have it show any wrinkles. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And she'll get it in there really square. Sometimes she'll sew it to a mat board. She'll make tiny little stitches and secure it to the mat board so that its own weight doesn't, pull on it too much. But, in this case, I don't know if she's going to sew this one or not. It may be able to just lay in there because it's got the mat board on two sides to secure it, and then it's got the glass and the other stuff on the back side to hold it in there. So it's possible that it may just lay in there, and that it'll be secured enough that it won't slip or anything like that. But if she thinks it's going to slip, she'll have to sew it in there, and that's the other way to do it. Now, the other thing that we've toyed with a lot and trying to figure out is some of the antiques that we have. We have one that's a $16.99. It's the oldest one in the shop. And I did put it in a frame, but ultimately I'd love people to see the back of that one too. And so when you go to a museum, sometimes they'll have these things in, humidity, light, all those things are controlled, and they're in these little cases. And they will have in some cases, little tiny tabs sewn to the edges, and those tabs are what's used to secure the sampler into whatever display it is. And so we've thought about doing that for some of the antiques too, just to make sure that they're never damaged. Now, some people don't like that either because you have to sew the little tab on there, but there's a whole lot of discussion around what to do with these things. But for my things, I come back to why did I purchase them? And it's really to share them with people. And so if I had them away somewhere, that's not really my mission. I didn't buy the first sampler ever until I knew that I was, imminently getting ready to open the shop. So I opened the shop in 2017 in March. The first sampler I bought was sometime in the fall of 2016, maybe this summer of 2016. And so that was really kind of my commitment to myself, is that for me, and different people have different perspectives on it, and this was just mine, but for me, if I was going to invest in that, it had to be to share it with people and to talk about it because they're important in terms of their history and their culture and, all those fun things that you learn about it. So that's one reason I'm so okay with sometimes putting these things out on display that other people they cringe every once in a while.
Yeah, that's just it. There's the museum purist approach.
Yeah.
And then there's the shop or anyone who is not in a museum where you got to loosen things up to have a little more practical use of these things
exactly.
for viewing. Yeah. And so I suppose you sew a tab on the corner. Ultimately doesn't really hurt anything. But
right.
Yeah, I'm sure the museum people just all go, "Oh no, don't do that."
Unfortunately, we've not had one in here when I've actually said, "Hey, you want to see something?" And I go to the office and I pull one out and roll it out on the table, with my hands.
Oh no!
It's always fun. I don't do that to other people's, but and people are just like, "Oh my gosh," they love seeing it, and I could go get white gloves and flip it, but the reality is, with the exception of a few of them, they've all been handled quite a bit, and they've survived just fine. Now I do require clean hands, and mine are clean, and most other people will never reach out and touch it. They just kind of look at it.
Right.
But my hands are always clean, and it always goes on acid-free tissue paper and things like that, so I do no harm. But I think it's important for people to see it, just like stitching in general, I think is just really important for it to be accessible to people, of all levels, of all things. We're not just a sampler shop. A lot of people, sometimes think we are, and we're not. We do a lot of other stuff, and we do that for a lot of reasons. A, because I like to stitch the other stuff, but also because the people that come in here, there's a nice chunk of sampler people, but there's a nice chunk of needlepoint people. There's a huge growth in embroidery, true embroidery. And so that's where a lot of the growth is coming right now. So it's important for everything to be, I think, accessible to people. And, I tell stories all day long about needlework, and it's kind of neat to see them go, oh, wow. And all of a sudden they're more interested in it, because they learn something about it.
That's interesting. You would say that I thought you were going to say there's a huge growth in cross stitch, but in embroidery.
Yeah.
So
Well, cross stitch I think the people have been there, and they're just getting hit by the light right now. You know what I mean? Like, I think that the social media is now putting a spotlight, or just bringing to the surface and bringing to out into the world all the people who've been stitching kind of on their own in solidarity or in small groups. And I think you're getting to see a lot of that through FlossTube and, just a whole lot of venues now for people, all the stitch cons, the different retreats people are talking about, Facebook, people are posting stuff. That stuff, I think that we're getting to see all the people that have been stitching for a long time. I do think that more people are picking it back up, and so I hear people say all the time, oh, I haven't done this in 20 years, and then they plunk down their brand new project, or they go and they retrieve an old one that they haven't touched in 20 years. And so I think people are coming back to it. But I see, and there's young people also picking up cross stitch. The 20-somethings and 30-somethings are picking it up online. So I don't get to physically see them in the shop once in a while, but I know they're there. But I see true growth in embroidery. It's very popular right now. It's certainly on trend. And it'll cycle in and out just like everything else does. But young people especially are coming in here and picking up embroidery. And not just young people, but middle-aged people. Everybody wants a piece of clothing right now that they got to embroider on. And you see it in home decor. You see it in, all kinds of things. You look around, and I've seen car commercials with cross-stitch things on them. I'm like, okay. But embroidery is really big. I saw a picture of a tattoo online the other day that was an embroidery tattoo. I've seen cross-stitch tattoos before, but this was embroidery. And I was like, that had to hurt.
yeah. There's that part of it. Yes.
Yeah. But I do. I mean, that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot of people come in, and it was neat. Yesterday, there was a young girl who might've been 17, maybe younger, but she was with her mom, and her mom was maybe 40 something. And I didn't realize at first they were mother and daughter. I thought they were kind of friends, but then I realized they were mother and daughter. But the younger girl really wanted embroidery, and she had picked a kit. And, I could have sold her the kit and let her walk out the door. But I started talking to her a little bit about it. And I said, well, do you mind if we open this? Because I knew it was her first kit. And she goes, no, let's do it. And so I wanted to talk to her about, how to handle the thread, what to do with the needle, how to start it, how to think about the stitch guide. And her mom, then said, well, I used to cross stitch 20 years ago. And I know some of these things, but not all of them. And so that was kind of neat so her mom was passing down some knowledge, but the younger person was taking it into a different, down a different path. And that was kind of cool to see. And they're both coming back Saturday to do beginning needlepoint with me. So that's kind of fun too.
Excellent.
So, we talked about the stitches and how they transfer between all the embroidery arts, and so they're both coming back to do beginning needlepoint. So at the end of the day, I think they will know cross stitch embroidery and a little bit of needlepoint, which is pretty fun. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah. What needle are we doing? Mainly charted canvas needlepoint?
Yeah, charted canvas. That's actually, a lot of people don't know this, but that's, it's hard for me to even say it because I feel like I'm betraying some. That's really one of my major loves.
It's okay. You're in good company, Kim.
Yeah, I think I'm a multifaceted person, but I like to do all kinds of stitching, but I really love counted needlepoint or charted canvas. I like the geometrics, and I came to it late. Like, I didn't learn how to do that until I was in my 30s, and I learned from Michael Boren, who did a lot of designs, and he did a lot of teaching. And at the end, before he retired, he's retired now, but he's still around. I'm trying to lure him back, but he taught with can't remember her name. Should have wrote that down. See,
Carol?
Poorly prepared. Yes,
Carol
that's
Lake.
right.
Yes,
right. That's exactly right. So they did stitch play designs, and they were on the Shining Needle Society. They did a lot of online stuff, and they did it well. And so we actually bought the rights to all of his charts after he retired, and we are able to use those to teach. And we don't have exclusive rights. We just have the rights to use them, to reproduce them, to sell them, to teach them. So we have the ability to teach with those and to, sell, do whatever we need to do. But those are the ones that I teach from. I start with, a freebie of his for the basic, and then I move into a few of the others and take them up to some of the others, just because it's such a nice overview of a lot of the stitches and a lot of the different threads that you get to use. That's the beauty in, I think, counted needlepoint, is all the different threads that you can use and the stitches. And the way he did his charts, he did the same chart, and he might do like 7 or 8 colorways. So you're not married to a particular colorway. I can, show those colorways to a student, and they can pick the one they want, and then we kit it that way, and that's what they stitch, and so, so that's what we'll be teaching Saturday. We do little classes, no more than 4 people in beginning needlepoint, because you can get buried in there. But, and then we move on as we move up. But, his are the ones that we use because he and Carol did really good instructions too.
Oh, so, yeah. No, I have, three of Carol's, and yeah, they're superb. The designs are superb. The instructions are superb. Everything.
Yeah.
Oh, Thursday night that I'm down there, set up a class. I'll do a class with you.
Okay. That's great. Yeah.
Sure. I love needlepoint. Do it.
I do too. And, we're trying to fill it out here in the shop. And, it's interesting. Most of the people that come in here, they want to do painted canvas. There's 2 camps in needlepoint, as you well know. And I've tried painted canvas. I'm intimidated by it. We all have our comfort zones, and that's not mine. so it's hard for me to feel good about selling it because it's not something I particularly enjoy. I don't hate it. It's just hard for me. I'm an accountant by trade. And I'm used to a set of rules and instructions. And to me, I feel like I'm in the wild blue yonder. When I'm painting canvas, I'm like, I don't know what stitch to do. I'm like, I don't know. So, anyway, so we kind of we had a little bit of that, but we, in all honesty, carved it out, and we stuck to counted needlepoint here. So we have lots of different canvas, and the threads, the other thing that we did when we were setting up the shop is we needed things, if we were going to take up space with it, they all needed to work together. And so the threads that you use in needlepoint, a lot of them are the same threads that you use in embroidery, the same threads that you use in cross stitch or specialty stitching. There's a lot of things that cross over here and there. And so it makes sense for us to do counted and to have some room for that devoted, in the shop. So.
Right. Oh, that's great. I did not know you were doing head needlepoint. Wow, that's fantastic. Yes.
Yeah, a little bit.
Hey, yeah, that's my favorite. I mean, I like to do, I say it's my favorite. That's what I learned out of the gate. And it's still what, if you say, hey, here's 3 different projects, which one would you do? I'd pick up the charted canvas one every time. But I enjoy the cross stitch, and have a little gold work project now that's sitting on the table.
Good for you.
I think it's good, number one, to try the different things.
Yeah.
But I also just love the challenge of dipping into something new. But I think it overall, it keeps you fresh, and it also transfers skills. I think people don't appreciate how skills transfer from one technique to another. And I think make it better all the way around. And of course, some people would argue, no, you should stick to one and get really good at it. Well, I think this is one of those hobbies where you can do multiple techniques and learn from all of them and be better all the way around. But
I completely agree. I think there's a level of confidence building that you find when you take what you know and you apply that to something else. It's kind of that same thing. Like, I think at some point in our lives, almost all of us in some job, somebody has said to you, I'll know that you really know it if you can teach somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're like, yeah. and you do figure out what you know and what you don't know by doing that. But I think the same is kind of true when you jump over to related disciplines in needlework, is that you realize how much you really do know. There's a lot you don't, but there's a lot that transfers between, and you come back to your first love a better, stronger stitcher for what you learned, by challenging yourself with something else. And so, I'm totally with you. I took one of Trish Nugent's classes at Winterthur, and I think it was a little bit of gold work, and I felt overwhelmed in there, but she's a good teacher, and it was neat to learn about the different things. And I still have that little project. Sometime I'll pick that back up. But, on that note, you did something really recently that I think is fantastic, and I took advantage of in one way, and one way I missed the boat. When you had the Royal School of Needlework on a little bit ago, I loved that. I've listened to that one several times, but I loved how open they were and what they were doing with trying to make needlework accessible to people, in their online classes. And, I've been to their facility in England once or twice, but it was just a walkthrough, and it was wonderful. But I didn't take a class. And the ability to not just go to, one of their satellite courses here, because that's a big time commitment. You might have to go for a week or, a few days. That's hard for a lot of people, not to mention the cost. But the fact that they put it online now just was stunning to me. And so I went out and I looked at it and I was like, wow, they covered the gamut. They've got a really good intro to all the different disciplines in, hand needlework, and the prices were, without the discount, were really reasonable for what you were getting out of that. And then when you threw that discount in there that they so graciously gave to your listeners, that was fantastic. So I signed up for one because I love black work too.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but I forgot about the discount.
Oh no.
So I was like, dang it. So I came back to the shop, and one of my helpers here that works with me a lot, Allie, I said, hey, you need to think about, because she's a weaver by first love. She loves to weave.
Oh.
I said, you need to think about doing one of these courses with the Royal School of Needlework, and we'll comp that, we'll pay for that. And by the way, don't forget the discount, because I forgot. So she was like, oh really? But so I kind of bring some of that over from my corporate world, is that you have to invest in your people too. And, it's good for people to learn new things. It makes them better.
Right. Oh yeah. Well, in the shop, if you have an employee who has some experience with another technique, then when somebody walks in, that only helps you.
You bet.
Yeah. Those, Morgan and Emma at the Royal School. Yeah. It was just a treat talking to them during the show, but even before and after. And I had a little bit of this in my head, that it was in an old world school where you go there and kind of maybe a little closed off, but quite the opposite. They are working night and day to make needlework of all kinds accessible and doable to everyone. And with all their satellite places, and then of course the main school, but then the online. I mean, they are really all about sharing it, and that was, I think, the one thing that stuck with me through the whole conversation and after was just that is these are enthusiastic people who really want others to learn and to use needlework for whatever application it might be, and they are there to teach you and make it accessible and make it doable. And that just has stayed in my head of all the things. But yeah, just tremendous ladies. Really was fun to talk to them. Yeah.
Yeah, and what a hat trick that is when you really put that into scope and you think about, how long needlework's been around, and the perception of a lot of people that it's it's a little old lady thing, and it was dead a long time ago. For these people to have taken this and turned it into something that not only is it accessible, but how many people watched the Game of Thrones this past weekend? I didn't actually. I had something I had to do, and I was devastated that I missed it. So I'm trying desperately not to hear any spoilers, and see their, some of their work, examples of the work, maybe not this week, but in prior episodes and stuff, know that, it's very relevant to today's society.
Right.
So they're doing all this work to make the classes available, and they're training people that are going on to these major movie sets and making these beautiful clothing that now to one of them made the point because of, high definition television and film, now
Right.
they have to be good stuff. You can't just glue a sequin on anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Yep.
got to be good stuff. Gosh, we're just in a wonderful place in terms of what's going on in the industry. I'm super excited about it. But to me, when I stepped back and thought about, how did they do that? Because it had to be really innovative for them to think about, stepping out of that traditional world of what they had been up to that point to then, create this online environment and all the classes and things that they do, the satellite campuses, to actually orchestrate that and get that out there and have it working is monumental. I just think it's fabulous. I stepped back from that objectively and said, wow, that's a big, that's pretty incredible really to me to think about it. But so I'm super excited about that. I'm happy for that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, tremendous organization, no doubt about it. Yep. All right, I missed you at Nashville.
Yeah, we did miss each other entirely, and I don't know how that happened.
I have
I
no
never
idea.
saw you one time.
I didn't
And
see
last
you
year,
either. Yeah.
I saw you around every corner. I literally never saw you one time.
Same here.
So.
Yep. It wasn't like, oh, there they are across the atrium. No, none of it. No.
Mm-mm.
So that was weird. So and we've done shows about this, but I was anxious to ask you, did you feel an extra excitement at that show, an extra enthusiasm for the hobby?
I did.
Okay.
So, this was my 5th Nashville Market. We actually, we opened 2 years ago in the brick and mortar, but we launched in 2014 as a small shop in my house and then an online shop. So the first thing I did was go to market. So this was my 5th market, and I felt like, yes, there was definitely a different vibe, and I have my perception of why that was, but I also feel like the quantity of quality product and new introductions was really on spot this year. I mean, there was not just a few beautiful things. There was a lot of beautiful, innovative, fun, offerings at Nashville this year. And the vibe, I think in the market itself was coming from 2 places. I think it came from designers being really excited about what's happening in the industry and kind of feeling like, they're kind of getting the wind underneath their wings now again, because there's so much great things happening, and I think they're starting to really believe it. And so that's transferring into their designs. And then I think the new designers that were out there, which you've had, at least one of them on your show and talked to them, those guys brought a whole new, energy into the marketplace, and they brought good stuff. And they're also symbolic of how many people are stitching out there. I mean, if these guys are able to, already kind of get their feet underneath them by selling their product, on Etsy or in their shops, wherever they're selling them, and then coming to a big market like Nashville. There's a lot of good stuff happening out there, and they came in with quality stuff, and a lot of it. They didn't come in there with like one or two good designs.
Right. Well, no, that was the younger, newer designers we saw there. Yeah, none of that was rookie level stuff. It was all top notch, really creative, innovative designs across the board. Yeah, that was. It wasn't like, well, this is what I have, and maybe next year I'll be a level better. No, it was I want, and they were selling out. Obviously it was working because they were selling out quickly. And, I thought that was, I felt a higher level, and this was only my second one, but I have to say that, when I walked away from last year, I just did not feel like, what is the big deal about this show? And then, well, all right, I'll go back next year and see. And to me, it was a significant level higher in terms of, all the way around. But these young designers that were there, that's the future, and I think that was a really strong element that played into an overall very positive picture.
Yeah, the other neat thing I saw with the younger designers is I saw some veteran designers and vendors, shop owners, people who sell fabric, taking them under their wing. Like when you looked around in the morning at breakfast, you would see them sitting with somebody who really knew the business, who'd been around 20, 30 years. You know what I mean? And so they were clearly not being ostracized for coming into the market, but they were being embraced by everybody, which is really fantastic. I just think the industry is growing. It's big. There's room for a lot of people and a lot of new things. And, everybody's really feeling that and enjoying that. And that's kind of playing into a lot of positivity. So I was excited about it. That was what I walked away with. I was pretty stoked about all that.
Yeah. No, it was a very positive statement for the hobby as a whole, not just cross stitch, which is primarily a cross stitch show, but for the hobby as a whole, because the dynamics are there for growth all the way around. Yeah. What anything that stood out for you at the show? Anything you bought that is gone from your shop 5 minutes after you put it on the table?
Yeah, people were really excited about a lot of things. So, and of course we did some pre-orders and stuff. So some of our stuff was almost sold out before we got home. But the most for this shop, and every shop's a little bit different because every shop does have its unique, its demographic, I guess. But for this shop, a couple of things were in really high demand. You had me at Flamingo from Hands On Design.
Yes.
People love that little guy, and it's so cute, and Jabco, just another button company, did a beautiful pin for it, a flamingo pin that has a little twist in its neck. And that was in really high demand before we even went to market. And so we reordered that while we were there. And sure enough, we had sold out and sold again. A Savior's Praise from Shakespeare's Peddler has been
I have a copy.
Everybody loves that. Yeah, yep. I heard about that. So that was really popular, and that one has sold out and come back again. Now, Blackbird always, their stuff always sells out. They're always popular, and they're such nice people too. So it's always fun, but their stuff, we've sold out of a lot of that and had to reorder. And with Thy Needle and Thread, everything she brought to market this year, and I know you guys talked about it before, but it was really, really good stuff. And so we sold quite a bit of that. Plum Street samplers, they're always good. Paulette Stewart of Plum Street, she always brings some great things. I love her stuff, but this year was no exception. She had some really great stuff, and we sold out of some of that and had to bring it back. And Summer House Stitchwork did something that was kind of neat. She kind of introduced a second line of designs, and I thought it was incredibly perceptive of her. She's got her ear to the ground for sure. So she's got her traditional stuff that she's always done that's really fabulous. And we had her teach here last year, and she's coming back this year, and we just announced it in our last newsletter, and we were probably half full at this point just because she just does fun stuff, and she's a finisher. She really teaches you how to finish. But she introduced kind of a subline that's really geared more toward that demographic in the market that's new. to cross stitch. And, you know, you can do it easily on Aida just as easily on Aida as you can on linen. The designs are pretty straightforward. They're all cross stitch. They can be finished out in a hoop, or you can put them on something else, you know, but she came out with 4 designs, and I'm drawing a little bit of a blank as to what she called it. But those, I think, are really great. It's interesting because what that told me is that she sees that whole other demographic out there that we don't always see in the shop, that are buying online, that are looking for that kind of thing, like sex symmetry designs. We sell a lot in the shop. They have their own stuff and they sell online. But, you know, that stuff, we keep that in the window, and that's what, you know, a lot of people come in to look at that are just walking down the street that weren't thinking about going into a needlework shop. You know, that thought never crossed their mind today. And they see that stuff in the window and they're like, hey, hold on. And they come inside, you know, and so it's those kinds of things that aren't so intimidating looking for somebody brand new, but they're colorful, they're pretty, they look manageable. I think that's, you know, that's an important part of the marketplace. And some of the new designers that came in, there were some beautiful samplers that came in from like the Fox and the Rabbit. But there was also Lindy Stitches and the Blue Flower, you know, designs that are new and interesting and pretty and relevant and yet not intimidating, you know, and they service that part of the market that just wants a fun stitch, you know, and just wants to enjoy it and wants it to be able to, you know, something they can finish and they're not scared to tackle on their own. And I think that's an important, you know, to your earlier point about being able to service people. I think we've got to pay attention to that part of the market, as well as the people who've been stitching for 30 years. And, those kind of designs coming out, I was glad to see. I was pretty excited about, because that tells me that, you know, our designers that we're used to dealing with in a brick and mortar place also recognize that there's a whole other group of people out there. And so we're trying to reach that group as well and just give an avenue for them to jump over into, you know, other things they might want to do, you know, more thread, more color, different threads, different fabrics. You know, there's Aida is beautiful, and there's some gorgeous Aida out now, especially from Picture This Plus. They do some beautiful stuff. But, you know, there's other stuff too that they can stitch on and other designs. And so being able to give them a bridge, you know, from just a purely online marketplace into something that's maybe broader, is fabulous. I thought that was pretty neat. So I was impressed with that. Queenstown Samplers brought out some really pretty stuff. She does some beautiful samplers. And, you know, I mentioned the Fox and the Rabbit, that I'm going to say it wrong, but that Mahala, and then the Botany Bay. Were just stunning. Yeah. I just sent Mahala a note to one of my model stitchers to ask her to please do Mahala, because I'll never get it done. But it's so beautiful. You know, I'd love to have it in the shop. And so, that was kind of my impression of market. I did feel the same thing you felt. I thought it had a whole different heartbeat to it this time. It was quicker, funner, you know, new. It felt new, you know, and so.
Yeah, and you mentioned about the new people. That's something that all of us in the hobby have to remember, is that churn that there is in the hobby. There's always going to be that percentage, I don't know, 20% or so of people who have been stitching forever and will stitch forever and have seen it, done it, so on and so forth. And then, you know, there's the big body of people who are somewhere in the middle, but then there's always that 25, 30% of the people in the hobby who are new and fresh, don't know, and are asking questions that you feel like have been answered 1,000 times. And you know, we have to keep that in mind, because those are the people that grow into the hobby, and giving them an opportunity, giving them the help and the designs to grow with is probably the most important part of the whole thing, I think.
I completely agree with you. I mean, you know, I think everybody in this industry has a deep love for it. I really do. I think that it resonates with us, the needle and thread, and we love it so much that we want it to survive beyond us. We want people to keep doing this. And so while we do want to be challenged and do things that we enjoy doing, most of us are pretty excited to see somebody new come into the craft or the art, however you want to think about it. And we're more than happy to try to talk to and teach and take the time out. But it is easy to forget, that in a group of 100 people, that there's probably 15 in there that, it's brand new. It
Right,
really is.
right.
Gosh, that's fantastic odds, actually. But, I mean, it is. And so, I, I really enjoy those parts of the day, and it happens at least once a day, if not a few times a day, where I stand at the register and I do what I did with this young girl I talked about, and I say, well, I can kind of tell usually whether they tell me or not if they, get everything, need a little help. But even a veteran, sometimes, if they say to me something like, well, gosh, I haven't done this in 20 years, or there's some indication that I think that it's been a while or it's been never, I'll immediately, I'll watch for their social cues, but I'll pull out the threads if they've got a DMC, and I'll show them which end of that skein to pull the thread out of
Yeah,
so that it doesn't
yeah.
cause a giant knot, which is the number end, by the way. Pull it with the end with the number. And I show them how to ply the strand, so you've got 6 strands in there and you want to pull out 1 ply at a time, and you hold the little bundle in your hand and you pull 1 string up until it's all the way out and lay it down. Then you pull the second one up until it's all the way out and lay it down, and you put those 2 together, but going through that, if that's old hat to them, they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm good. And I'm like, okay, great. We move on. And if they keep listening to me, I keep talking to them for a few minutes because,
Yep.
and usually if there's more than one person, there's a second person that's standing there looking like they know it all. And then at the end of 2 or 3 minutes, they're like, I never knew that. I can't believe I've been stitching for 20 years and I never knew that. Well, I didn't know it either until somebody told me, and I think we just forget to say it. But I do think that there's so much love for what we do and so much desire to see it continue that everybody is usually very willing to take time to explain it or to talk about it. I think more often than not, we might just forget, or we might not recognize the signs. And so I kind of err on the side of caution. And if there's any doubt in my mind that they've, that they're, a pro from Dover, then I'll take a little bit of time and try to talk them through it. And I would encourage everybody to do that. It's fun to teach, and I think I mentioned to you one time that even in our day jobs and all the things that we do to actually support our hobby, our love of this craft, somebody somewhere has said to you, the best way to know if you know how to do something is to teach somebody.
Yep.
And there's a lot of reward in that for you as well as for the person that you sit down and take a couple minutes to talk to. And there's so many people excited about it today that it is a lot of fun. And it's a lot of fun to see, 17-year-olds in here wanting to stitch, whether they're doing embroidery or whatever they're doing. It's exciting.
Yep.
So
yeah. Teaching something will make you get your act together in a hurry. There's no doubt about that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you won't lick that thread so quick.
No, you won't. No, you won't.
But we still do. So.
Yeah. There's when we look at the hobby, and you look at local needlework stores like yours, and then you look at the online options, and the number of people whose local stores have gone out of business, and so they don't have some place they can drive in half an hour or even an hour to go to a store, and of course then the online business, and then FlossTube and all the other social media things. What dynamics are you seeing happening in terms of interaction with your customers, the ones that can walk into your store, but then also others that can't and must do it by through the internet or by phone? What is happening there? What are you seeing happening with those customers and the dynamics that come to play in terms of you as a go-to store?
That's that's an excellent question. I mean, I've been thinking about that for a little while in terms of what is an LNS, which means in our world, it stands for local needlework shop. And you'll see a lot of people when they post online, they're like, oh, talk to your LNS or, your LNS, or you'll see people say, oh, I went to my LNS. But I had somebody walk into the shop this week and they said, and they were from somewhere in Pennsylvania, I think, or New York. And they made the comment, "Oh, I'm so excited to be here. I only live 2 miles from my LNS, but I was super excited to know that you're here and to get to come here." And I said, "Whoa, hold on. You live 2 miles from your needlework shop." I had never heard that. And then granted, I've only been in this shop for 2 years, but in 2 years, I've seen a lot of people come in from other places, and I've never had anybody say I only live 2 miles from my LNS. And that really kind of made me think more about what it means to be a local needlework shop, and what I hear and what I felt for a while. I feel like a local needlework shop really is changing, and maybe has already changed, and we just haven't given it a moniker yet. We haven't named it something else. But when a lot of people think about their local needlework shop, they may be thinking about a shop that's 500, 1,000 miles away, whatever. It's a really short distance to reach a shop online now, or to make a phone call in a lot of cases. So a lot of people who don't have a shop within 2 to 3 to 4 hours of them, they're not always able to travel to a shop. And when they are, they're excited about it. But not everybody can do that for a lot of different reasons. And so they become part of a community that identifies with a shop of their choice, and that becomes their local needlework shop. And so they may do that for a number of different reasons. It may be an online shop that ships the very next day, always, always. It may be a shop that when they call, takes the time to talk to them. And whether they talk about what's going on in their day, or they talk about, the issues that they're trying to figure out with the needlework, or they give them some feedback on what kind of threads they might want to use. And they may identify with that kind of shop, or it may be a shop that they like to go take classes at. There's a lot of different reasons, but what I think is happening in the marketplace and in the industry is that the local needlework shop is not so local anymore. In fact, I think that's a rarity, a huge rarity. I think that people who truly have an LNS, a local needlework shop, and by local I mean within your town, I think is in a huge minority. And so when we talk about LNS all the time now, it's not a local needlework shop. It's something different. And I was trying to think of what would you call it? And I haven't really articulated it yet, but the thing that came to mind was the old saying, "Home is where your heart is." And I think about it that way. People identify with the shops that their heart's in for whatever reason. I think that's what the local needlework shop is now for a lot of people. It's not local anymore. It's your chosen shop, and it's your tribe, and it's where you like to shop, like to be part of that community in all those different ways that you can. And so I think that's driving behavior changes as well in the shop owner, because now, you don't just sit in your little shop and wait for somebody to come through the door. You spend a lot of your time online. You spend a lot of your time on the phone. You have to look at social media, whether that's Facebook or that's Instagram. You may get out there and you may do floss tubes, or you at least know who's in those floss tubes. You may have people in your shop that do floss tubes. I've seen a lot of that. That's pretty neat, that local stitchers are doing the floss tubes and they identify with the shop, and so they're bringing people into that shop. So, that's where I see us going. I think we're in a huge state of flux, and actually I think we've already transitioned, and we just haven't recognized it yet. I think that we're just something entirely different now. Yeah. And I think that the successful shop owner recognizes that, and recognizes that their demographic is huge. It's really however they define it. They can define it to really the people in their physical geographic community. Or they can define it to anywhere in the world that they can reach out and touch through social media. Mm-hmm. And that's where you really see, it's a beautiful thing. It's like this is going to sound sappy, but it's like a little flower garden, and there's all kinds of different flowers in there, because each shop's a little bit different. And which one's your favorite one and why? Is it because of its color? Is it because of how it smells? There's all kinds of different reasons that you like a particular flower. And I think that's what's happening with the shop too. People are choosing shops for different reasons, but I don't think that an LNS anymore is a local needlework shop. I think it's a needlework shop. And it could be online and it could be brick and mortar, or it could be both, which, we've talked about before, the importance of doing both. I think it's reaching out to a community of people and giving them a place to belong, whatever that means to them, because most people aren't driven by price alone, and that's something I learned in my corporate arena too, is that when, I used to manage a lot of people respond to different things. And when you really, really peeled back all the layers, it wasn't just about what you paid them. It was about the recognition you gave them and about how much they felt a part of the team. And I think the same thing is true for our customers. They can spend their dollars wherever they want, and they're not, sometimes people are confined by price, and they will go to the place that, they can get the best price. But more often than not, they choose to shop with a place that makes them feel important and special, and or they answer their questions, or they take the time to talk to them, and they are genuine about that. It's one thing to take that tone of voice with somebody and be like, oh, hey, I'm your buddy. It's another thing to genuinely care about almost a stranger on the phone, and that takes a lot. And to do that online, but I think that's what people are looking for. I think it's not just young people who are now looking for something more tangible than what they've had in the digital age of their years so far. But I think as adults and older adults, lifestyles have changed a lot, and a lot of people are looking for a place to belong. And the easiest way to do that is online or on the phone, because it's not so easy to travel. And when you can travel, it's fantastic. It's like nirvana, and that's what we're hearing when we hear from people at StitchCon and, all these different retreats. It is nirvana for stitchers to get in there with other people, it's fabulous. But there's so many more people that get to go to those things. And so I think as a shop owner, whether you're an online shop owner or whether you're a brick and mortar, and I think not just shop owners, but designers and people who are doing FlossTube, they're doing really fabulous things because they're giving people a place to belong, a voice to add to the conversation, a conversation to add it to,
Yeah,
I think that's why we're seeing the growth in the industry.
Yeah, conversation to add it to add your voice to. That's so important. And it is the community thing, and that word, I get to the point sometimes where I just want to, I detest that word, but it really does fit what's happening here. Is the community of people who are in many ways isolated because of where they live, or isolated from a store, or they had a store and it went away, and they really don't have anyone. And when you have online connection with stores and FlossTube people and designers and can have exchanges, then you continue to feel like you're part of something, and you also have resources that went away when that store closed, or went away when traffic got so bad you couldn't drive to the store, and so it gives you an out, and it gives you a legitimate out. It isn't a second rate thing. It's a legitimate, here's where I can deal with people who are of like mind and like skill level, or people who have a higher skill level who can really help me and help me enjoy this hobby more, and I can do it from my home. And and then I know what you mean to online, to have it. You develop an affinity for an online store. It's really, for the good ones, quite easy to do, and pretty soon you know that's the first place you think of, is that store that helped you online, or you weren't sure about a thread and they sent you a couple samples to look at, or any number of things that furthered the cause, and you didn't have to leave your house.
Yeah, no, I think those things, that's absolutely true, and those things are really important. And I do believe that's what's that's what's causing the growth that we see. It's actually this ability to communicate so quickly and easily with so many people, and to feel connected. And that's another word we hear a lot, but it's true and it's important. And you feel connected to something, and you have an avenue to share your work too, and so that's a lot of what FlossTube's about, and Instagram. You get to post on there what you're working on, what you finished. You get to see what other people finished and maybe ask some questions about, like I see all the time, every day, what threads did you use? How did you change that? And designers get to see, and I think it's making the designers, well, they're putting a lot into it, just like all the shop owners are. You're putting a lot of yourself out there to talk to people and interact. But I think they're getting a lot of value from it too, because they're starting to see what people are interested in, and
Yeah,
and so
that gets overlooked, doesn't it? Doesn't that get
yeah, I
overlooked?
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a reciprocal thing. And so, I really, I don't always get to answer the phone because we are, maybe two people in here during the day and that's it. And so when we're busy, we can't get to the phone. But when I get a chance to answer the phone and talk to people, I really enjoy it. And I feel good afterwards, and I feel like I know them and I don't know what they look like. And sometimes I might not remember their name because my memory is just not that great, but I remember the conversation and I remember how I felt when I had it, and I walk away with that. And sometimes those conversations make the day.
Right.
They're like, wow, okay, I needed that, and you feel really good about what you're doing, and you hope that the other person feels good about it too. But yeah, I do think that it's a lot bigger than just selling somebody a thread or a chart. I mean, you can buy a chart or a thread anywhere, but being able to see what people are doing and talk to people and have conversations, whether it's a digital conversation or a voice conversation or an email, whatever. I think those things are really important to people, and I think that's what's causing us to see this industry expand quite a bit, and it is expanding. And I'll tell you another reason that I know that it is because the quilt shops now, the designers for quilts are now looking and starting to design for cross stitch. And yeah,
Okay.
they're trying to tap back into the industry. And there was a particular online quilt shop an online shop for the quilt industry that was at our Nashville Market and bought pretty heavy. And their response is that they're selling it. And they are, and there's a lot of crossover. And, we live right beside a quilt shop where we share some space and we share a lot of demographic. Now, there's a lot of quilters that just don't want to stitch, but there's a good chunk that do. They want to do embroidery on their quilts, or they also stitch, or they come in pairs. There's one that stitches and one that quilts, or somebody that used to quilt, now they stitch, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of interplay. But it was very interesting to me that I'm now starting to get in the mail charts sent to me by quilt designers, cross stitch charts that they've now designed. And I'm like, okay. And at first I didn't know how to feel about that. I was like, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This is mine.
Yeah. Stay in your lane.
Yeah. And then I was like, wow, how cool is that? Because that shows you right there that there's growth. Because if those guys, they're a huge monster industry, and anybody that's listening to this that quilts knows that I speak the truth, although I don't quilt. They're a monster industry. If they are looking our way and seeing growth, enough growth to invest, then we know that we've got something good going on, and we should all feel good about it and do our best to, keep teaching and keep enjoying and, stitching in public and, doing what we can do, answering those questions, and those of us who design, the people out there that design, gosh, keep doing it. I mean, I don't know how they come up with really cool, beautiful new things.
I don't know either.
As often as they do, but they do.
Yeah.
God bless them. I hope they keep doing it, and I hope we keep seeing more of them, because I think there's room. There's a lot of room for it.
Yeah, I might have one good idea a year. That's it.
Yeah. And another thing that's really kind of interesting too is the global growth. It's not just here in the U.S. We're Americans, most of us. There's a lot of people on here listening that aren't, but the majority of us are Americans. We tend to be kind of focused on America. There's a lot of growth globally, and so we're seeing a lot of new designs come out of other countries, truly newly created designs. There's a lot of interest in cross stitch in other countries. Russia comes to mind. There's a lot of interest in Russia in stitching. And there's some good designers out there now. The UK has been good for a long time. There's all kinds of places where we're starting to see stuff from. But I think that it's not just here in the US, I guess. And if you pay attention to social media, you see that the places where people are from, like if you send out a newsletter, you can look at the statistics and you see where it gets opened in the world. And more, I see things that are not just in the U.S. There's a lot of people all over the world. And I think that, there again, we have a responsibility to interact and to try to interact with those people, because sometimes it's hard from a language perspective. We forget that not everybody can read or, understand English, and it's tough, but they try really, really hard. I get emails a lot in other languages, and you just pop it into a translator, and I speak a few words here and there. I read better than I speak of some other languages. Russia, I can't read or speak. So I'm like, okay, I don't know what letter that is, but maybe Google will tell me. But I think we have to be conscious too that the world is interested in this craft. And, it's great if we can open ourselves up a little bit to help with that too. I get requests to send things sometimes overseas, and some countries I'm really familiar with and I have no issue sending it. Some I took pause with, and in the beginning I wouldn't ship there, and I was like, I think it's going to get lost. I don't know if it's going to make it, and so for me, I've had to get my head around, there's people that really want to stitch, and they want to stitch this. And if I can get it to them, I should try. And so, you insure it and you send it, and if it gets there, it gets there. And if it doesn't, it was insured, it comes down to that. But, and so I think, sometimes we just have to expand a little bit the horizon, because, it's important. It's really important. You look at all the beautiful needlework. I mean, the Japanese needlework that's out there, it's just stunning. And, you said gold work earlier, which is traditionally Japanese, I think. But all the samplers that come from all over the world. There's a lot of reasons to remember that we have, stitchers in other places just besides the U.S., and to try to find ways to bring them into our larger, greater family of stitchers.
Well, and that's something that I continue to learn with the guests that I've had from around the world, is just that. We tend to, as Americans, kind of think we're the only thing that exists, but no, the needlework hobby, arts, is very active all over the place. And yes, you mentioned Russia. I've tried a couple times to get a Russian guest. I really would like to talk to somebody from Russia, because I see stuff all the time. There's a tremendous amount of beautiful work being done in Russia. And, of course, we as Americans with history, we don't think of that, but there's just an awful lot of creativity. And I'd really like to have someone from Russia to talk to about what's going on over there. But, it's just everywhere. The whole Australian market is just booming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just booming. And, the designers there are just amazing. And Brendan and Karen Kirk coming to Nashville, and I know they went home, and I'll bet you for 2 weeks that's all they did was ship orders.
Yeah.
Because they have a lot to offer, and it really is. It's a global thing, and it's all reachable these days through the internet, and that's the huge plus. Yep. We have to stop, Kim.
Aw.
Yeah.
Well, there's one more thing. Can I mention one more thing really quick?
Well, sure.
Okay. I'll be your friend. So there's a really cool new design that just came out that I think deserves mention because of two things. It's coming from the Victorian Rose Needle Arts, and it's a sampler named Christian Gessinger, 1839. It was stitched by a man or a boy. I don't know how old he was when he stitched it, but it was stitched by a male, which is really cool. It's beautiful, and it was stitched all in wools. And the model for that was stitched by a man named Robert Smith. And he's going to allow us to have the model on display here, so we're super excited about that. But that's pretty unusual. And I'm super excited that Victorian Rose, reproduced it, and that it's so pretty, and that it's done in wools. Both the antique and the model were stitched in wools, Gentle Art overdyed wools. And stitched by a man. I just think that's fantastic. So I'm super, and the man that stitched it, Robert, he's an amazing stitcher. So anyway, you guys, a lot of people might have seen it online, but it's a really pretty thing. And, I just wanted to mention that because I think it's cool.
Whoa. Wow. Wool on what ground cloth?
Linen.
Really? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, linen. But you could easily transfer it to needlepoint canvas. Yeah, you can do that. People do that all the time with, counted charts. You can transfer it over pretty easy.
Right.
And you could, use that wool, or you could use something a little thicker, like a watercolor or something. But just really cool, and it's a pretty design. But I just thought that was really neat. We're excited. And we're really grateful that Robert's letting us display it. But
that sounds exciting. So send me a picture. I'll put a picture on the page for this.
Okay.
So people can see. Yeah, people should see that.
Yeah.
Hey, there are actually males in this hobby. Think about that.
There's a lot. I have a lot of male stitchers come in the shop. I do.
Think about that.
Yeah, there you go. And they're really good usually, just like you. Really, really meticulous, good stitchers. But
it's okay to do it.
Not like me. I'm just a hobbyist.
Is that what it is? Okay. All right, I'll make a note of that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Gary. I appreciate you letting me talk for a little while, and the things that we talked about are important to me. So I appreciate that too. Thank you.
Always enjoy it, Kim. Always enjoy it. Thanks to everyone for listening. Yep.